Hilchis Gneivah Perek Revi. Now the din is that a ganav pays kefil. A gazlan doesn't pay kefil. Now there's another din which l'chura Gzeres HaKosov, that when a person is a shemer and he's a toyen tainas Gneivah, his tainas that it was niglav and therefore he's potter, and then lepel he swears a shvuas hashemrim of this taina, and then Edom come along and say that the pekodin was in his house, so then he becomes a ganav. Now if he tainas nevda, so l'chura is the same taina, he's taina that he's potter. But lepel, there's a difference if the taina was nignava or the taina was nevda. If the taina was nignava, so then he has a din of a ganav and he's chayiv kefil, and as a result of that he can also be chayiv dalad v'hei. Masha'inken, if he taina is nevda, so he doesn't have a din of a ganav, and memela he's just a din of a gazlan, he's mechuyev to pay back the karen. That's it. That's this halacha. Perek Revi. Hatoyin shenignav mibeisei apikodin. He tainas that the pikodin was nignav mibeisei. Is im nishba. In other words, if he would taina nigzal also wouldn't work. He tainas who was nignav mibeisei apikodin is im nishba if he swears, and then the tomar swearing with tomar shvos hashemrim, and v'achar kach bo edim shesheker toan v'shapikodin hazeh etzlei. So the din is arizim mishalom tashlumi kefil. Shariyu atzmi aganav. He has the din. He himself is the ganav. That's din number one. And then v'im tavachu mocher achar shenishba. If a person, the same story that he was toyen shenignav and he swore that it was nignav, and after he swore that it was nignav, he was tavachu mocher. And then later on, Edom came along and said that b'shas when he was nishba, the Gneivah was b'shusei, so maybe he was a ganav. And then afterwards he was tavachomachar. So there's a say on the fact that there was a Gneivah. And when did the Gneivah take place? While he was nishba, that it was a nignav, that was the Gneivah. And now there's also the Edom, the same Edom or other Edom, that he was tavachomachar. So the din is mishalom tashlumi arba v'chamisha. That's din number one. So the din is that when a person tainas a tainas Gneivah, and then he's nishba, that he's nishba on this tainas Gneivah, and the pale was bershusei, he has to pay kefil. Now, there's a din b'chlal when a person is kaifer b'momen, and then if a person is kaifer momen, so and then he swears that he doesn't owe this money, and then he goes ahead and is moida that he swore falsely, so there's a chiyuv choimish. Nachama, when a person is kaifer b'momen, and then he swears falsely, and this swearing doesn't have to be dafka and bezin, it can be even chutz lebezin. Person swears that he doesn't owe the money, and then he's moida that he did owe the money, so he's mechuyev and choimish and an osham as well. Now, Bamedvar Mamurim, when he's moida, Masha'inkin, if Edom came along and say that he swore falsely, that he lied and he swore falsely, for that you don't bring a Chaimish V'Noshim. The Chaimish V'Noshim is only when he is moida. That's din number one. Now, din number two is that even if a person, L'moshel, in this case that we said, he was a Toyin, Tainus Ganav, that was Nignav, and then he was swore falsely. So Be'emes, and now there's Edom that he was lying. So be'emes an osham he doesn't have to, a choimish he doesn't have to pay the pashtus advarim, a choimish and an osham, because the viola he wasn't moida. He wasn't moida. If he's not moida, so he's not chayiv, not a choimish, not an osham. Masha'inkin, if he is moida, so if he's moida, be'emes he's chayiv an osham. But on the other hand, he's not chayiv a choimish, because there's a din that money which you're chayiv a kefil for, you're not chayiv a choimish. That's this new din. Another din is this. That money which you're chayiv for it for kefil, so you're not going to be chayiv a choimish. So mela, if a person would have, let's say, tained nevda, and then he would have swore falsely, and then he would have been moida, so the din is that he would be chayiv, he's chayiv a choimish. If he tained nignava also, and Edom wouldn't have come, so he also would have been chayiv a choimish, because he would never have been ganav. Masha'enken, if he tainas, if there was Edom that came and said nignava, so memela for that shvua, he's chayiv kefil, so he's chayiv kefil, this moment he is chayiv kefil, so then he's not going to be chayiv a choimish. He's not going to be chayiv an oshim unless he's moida, and he's not going to be chayiv a choimish even if he is moida. That's this din. Then the Rambam says weiter, the eini mevi osham al pi Edom al shvuasei. Whereas for his shvua, and it's only al pi Edom, he's not going to bring, there's no osham, because an osham has to be dafka haidah. That's din number one. And then he said, weiter, ve'eni mevi chemish. Even if he is moida, he's not going to bring a chemish, because there's a new din. She'en ha-chemish mishtalim in ha-kefil. Since he's paying kefil, because there was Edom that came, so memela there's no chiyuv chemish. That's din. Now, that's talking about if Edom came after he was nishba. If Edom came there after he was nishba, so then there's a chi of kefil. However, when bo Edom kedem sheyishava, if Edom came before he was nishba, a person taina the tainas gana bepikodin, and Edom came before he was nishba, is ein mishalim ela keren bulvat. Let's just make a sikum. When a person is tainas gana bepikodin, he has to, and he swore falsely, and Edom came along and said that he swore falsely because the pikodin was birshusei, so he's chayiv kefil. He's chayiv kefil. And Memelis, and since it's because he has a din of a ganef, and Memela, as a result of that, if afterwards he went ahead and was tavach u'machar, so he's chayiv daled v'hei. That's din number one. Now we're learning another din that lepeil, as a result of those edim, even though he swore falsely, and normally when you swear falsely, you have to bring an osham, but you don't bring an osham for the fact that Edom says swore falsely. In order to bring an osham, you have to admit that you swore falsely. So only if you admit you swore falsely will you bring an osham. Now, as far as the chaimish is concerned, even if you admit you swore falsely, but since Lepeil Edom came, and as a result of that, you're paying kefil, so mele we have a rule that money that you're paying kefil for, you don't pay chaimish for. That's this din. Now, this din is only if the Edom came after he swore, so then he's chayiv kefil. Mashenkin, if the Edom came before he swore, so then he's not chayiv kefil, and then there could be the din of chaimish v'osham. If he's made, it'll be chayiv sayach chaimish and sayach. Halacha beis. B'medvar mamurim, that he'll have a din of a ganef on this pikodin, shenishba kedem sheishlach b'pikodin yad. In other words, he wasn't a shilech yad b'pikodin. There was a regular pikodin, and was b'rshusei, and he was a shemer, and he's tainig Gneivah, so he gets a din of a ganef. Avalim shalach b'yad, but if he was a shilech yad in this pikodin, before this time of Gneivah with the shvuah, and v'to and tainas ganef, v'nishba ubo edim, so he's patim in a kefil. Why? Shekiv and sheshalach yad is neschayah be'vikono. When a shemer is a shlech yad be'vikodin, so he becomes a gazlan. And Memela, since he's a gazlan, so Memela, he can't be a ganav anymore. He was already a gazlan on this money. And now, since he was a gazlan on this money, so the fact that he's now tining Nignava or not, it's not negeh, because it's mum and guzzle. Nignava is when he's a shemer on something, and Lepeil right now, through this taina, he's being goin of it. Mashenkin, if he already became a gazlan on it, so Memela, he can't become a ganav. Halacha gimel v'chein, hatein tainus aveda v'pikodin. As we said, this din that you become a ganav on a pikodin is only if you're a tein tainus ganav v'pikodin. Mashenkin of hatein tainus aveda v'pikodin v'nishba, and then v'chazar v'toan tainus ganav v'nishba. Later on, we'll say in another bezin. One bezin he was a tein tainus aveda, and he was nishba, so he became a gazlan on the money. And then he brought him to another bezin. Over there was a tein tainus ganav v'pikodin. So the din and v'charka bo edim. So the din is again patim and akefil. Shekvar yotze apikodim midei abayil mishvor yishena. When he was nishba in the first bezin, and he said that it was nevdas. At that point in time, he became a gazlan on this money. Since he became a gazlan on this money, so Mimele he can't to become a ganef on the money. So that's the kudus adin is that a shomer could become a ganef on the dover hashomer on the pikodin if he's a toyin tainas ganef and he's nishba. That's how he becomes a ganef on this pikodin. B'medvar mamurim, if before he became a ganef, he didn't become a gazlan. Masha'inkin, if he already became a gazlan on this money, for example, he was a shlech yad bepikodin, so he became a gazlan on this money, or he was already a toyin tainas aved on this money, and the nishba, so he already became a gazlan on this money. So b'chiyah gavna, so then he, at that point in time, since yotza pikodin midei abayla v'shvor yishena, so in other words, you can't become a ganav a moment which is already guzzled. That's this din. Now there's a diuk in halacha gimel where the Rambam says hatein tainas aveda b'pikodin v'nishba. Why isn't it get the nishba? If he was a tein tainas aveda b'pikodin, even without nishba, so he should have a din of a gazlan. I'll call upon him. The Lashon Aram is nizla because bepashtos, since he still owes the money. Whereas when a person is a tein tainas gazlan b'pikodin and he lepeil didn't swear yet, so he really still owes the money because he's not nifter from the chiyuv. So Meli still has a din shemer. He still has a din shemer. Halacha dalet. Hatoyin tainas ganev ba'aveda. So till now we're talking about a pikodin, something that someone gave it to you. Hatoyin tainas ganev ba'aveda v'nishba and v'acharkach bo edim she'aveda b'shusei and v'sheker toyin is also the same din. Mishalim tashlumi kefil. Shenemer in that parsha where we learn out this din that hatoyin tainas ganev b'pikodin becomes a ganav that is chayav kefil. Shnemer al kol aveda. Over there also says al kol aveda. So we learn now that this chidush, that atein tainas ganav bipikodin, it becomes a ganav, and this chayav kefil applies not only to a pikodin but also to a aveda. Now the Rambam paskins that a shemer aveda has a din of a shemer socher. So when a person is toyin tainas ganav ba'aveda, so l'chur he's chayav. So a normal shemer, when you say he's toyin tainas ganav ba'aveda, means he's a shemer chinam. He's a shemer chinam, and he's potter b'gneiva. So when he's toyin tainas ganav b'pikodin, so he becomes a ganav. Masha'inkin, when we're dealing with a shemer aveda, so l'chur atein tainas ganav ba'aveda, atein tainas ganav ba'aveda, he's chayav. So how could he become a ganav through being atein tainas ganav ba'aveda? So on that the Rambam continues. As we learned before, there's a hechatimtza that the ganav was listim mezuyim. It's not pshat listim mezuyim came and grabbed it from you as listim mezuyim armed robbers and grabbed it for you, because then they don't have a din of a ganav, they have a din of a gazlan, because they're grabbing it out of your hands. We're talking about he was a ganav, but lepel, since he was a listim mezuyim, he was a person that was armed. And they was afraid. The Bailam were afraid to stop him because he was armed. So therefore, even though he's a shemer socher, and normally a shemer socher is chayev b'Gneivah, but a Gneivah of a listim mezuyim, he's aware that he's stealing, but he's a Gneivah of a listim mezuyim, has a din of an oinus, and therefore even a shemer socher is also potter. Now that is a shemer aveda is potter. That's what we're saying. But who sheyitin? That's only when the shemer aveda is timing. Shenignev a listim mezuyim. It was nignev through listim mezuyim shu onus upater. Aval imtoan shenignev a b'leyenis. But if he was tiny, there was tamas in nigneva, and there was no disoinus of listim mezuyim is pater min hakefil. Why? When they show chayav l'shalma pitanosi. When they come along and they ask him, where's this aveda? And he tainas it was nigneva. So fakert, you can't say he becomes a ganav because of his taina. He becomes chayav because of his taina. When they show chayav l'shalma pitanosi. So this din of atein tainas ganav ba'aveda v'nishba has to be only when he's a toyin tainas listim mezuyim. Now that is a pashtus a shemer socher, a regular shemer socher, a regular shemer chinam could taina regular tainas Gneivah, and memela he's potter, and memela if he was nishba and nimtza b'yodei, so he becomes a ganav. Mashenk and a shemer socher could also taina nigneva, but nigneva with a listim mezuyim. And lepeil if he swears, and then is nimtza biyadei, so then he becomes a din ganav. Halacha hey. Hatoyin tainas ganav b'pikodin v'nishba. He was a toyin tainas ganav. He was a nigneva b'pikodin, and he was nishba. And v'achar kach bo edem shu b'rshusei. Edem came that it was b'rshusei, and then he was meida. Perhaps you have to add he was meida. He was meida that what the edem are saying is true, and he lied, and now it's taka b'rshusei. And now v'chazer v'toyin b'tainas ganav v'nishba. Again, he was tainas ganav. He said taka. In other words, Sunday he was a toyin tainas ganav, and he was nishba. And then Edom came on Monday, and he was meida that it's taka by him, but it's still by him. And now on Tuesday again he's tiny that it was stolen between Monday and Tuesday. It was chazer v'toyin b'tainas ganav v'nishba. And v'charkach again is bo Edom shadayim b'shusihu. And afilu may upon the same item. So he keeps becoming a ganav on this item, and Mele keeps getting chiyuv kefil. It's chayav kefil, I'll call taina v'taina. So there's a chiyuv kefil, and there's the karen. You can't have two chiyuv karen. It's the same chiyuv karen. He has to return this item. So it's the same item that he has to return again. Masha'ink in the chiyuv kefil, there's a chiyuv kefil for each shvua. Chayav kefil, I'll call taina v'taina. V'im nishba chomish pamim. So his nimtza mishalom shishi, he has to pay the item 6 times. Ha-karen shehivke detzli, which he always has to return that karen. He always has to return that karen. And those after he swore once, he has to return that karen. Now he swore again, so now again he has to return that karen, because now is in his gala that karen is still here. He has to return that karen. So in other words, if he wouldn't have sworn the second time, if it wouldn't have been the whole story the second time, he would have to return the karen. He would have to return the karen and the kefil. He would have to return the karen and the kefil, even if that story actually happened. Even if the second story that he said that it was nignav actually happened and it wasn't a lie, so he still owes the karen and the kefil for the first shvua. For the first shvua, he owes the karen and the kefil. But since this karen, which is the first karen that he owes for the first shvua, is the Karen that's we're dealing with in the second shvua. So he can't be mechuyev another Karen for that Karen. In other words, it's the same Karen. He's saying that Karen which I owed you, so that Karen was nignav. That Karen was nignav. So now he has to return that Karen. So therefore he's only chayiv for the Karen. He only is chayiv one, each one. Masha'in kain for the kefil. He has to chayiv for each one. Chayiv kefil al kol taina v'taina. V'em nishba chomish pamim. V'nimtza mishalom shisha. HaKeren shehivked, that's like the original Keren, and the Chamisha bekeren, and 5 times the Keren, Bishum the Chamisha kveila shel Chamish Shvuz, because of the 5 times that he has to pay kefil for the Chamish Shvuz. So you have to add over here. I mean, the word is that he's still a shamer. In other words, when a person makes someone into a shamer, so that person becomes a shamer, and mele there's this din that atoyin tainas Gneivah bipikodin becomes a ganef. Whereas if he's not a shamer, so then he can't become a ganav al din shamer. So now he was already a ganav on this item, and now lepel, so he's chayav keren v'chemish. He's chayav keren v'chemish. He's chayav the item to return the item back. The item is still banned, so he has to return the item back, and now he has to also pay a kefil. Now this item which he has to return back now is still lying in his rishus. Does he still have a din of a shamer on this item? So obviously, with Nemigon over here, that he still has the din of a shamer, and therefore, since he admitted to what the Edom said, so I mean, if he didn't admit to what the Edom say, so he can't have a din shamer. He's claiming that it wasn't true. He's claiming that it wasn't true, and the Bailam also, I'm sure, don't want it to be Bershusei. So Mela, so he doesn't have a din shamer. But since Lepel, he's admitting that what the Edom said were true. So even though he tried to steal, but Lepel, this item is still in his possession. So he still has the din of a shamer. Since he has the din of a shamer on this Karen, which he has to return, that Karen that he has to return now, he's a shamer on that Karen. And now, again, he tried to steal that Karen, which he admitted originally they had to return it. But now he tried to steal it again. He tried to steal it again by tining that it was. In other words, if his tiner was true the second time, so he would be potter from return l'chura. He would be potter from returning the Karen. Because he had to return, in other words, he had to return the Karen, I made a mistake before, in other words. He had to return the Karen and the Kefil. In other words, what happened was, he was a shamer, let's go through this. He was a shamer. And Lepel, they gave him the item, he was a shamer, and he was a Toyintainus Gana B'Kodin, and now he was found to be a liar. So he has to return the item of the Pikodin, plus Kefil. Now, but this item, which he has to return, is in his possession. Now he's timing that this item which I have to return, which is in my possession, which now I became a shamer on that item, which I have to return. So now that item got lost, got nignav. Now I'm potter on the item. So if I became a shamer on that item, and that's the item that I had to return, so l'chura, I don't have to return that item anymore. It's just like your item, you give it to me, and it was nignav, I don't have to return it. So this item which I had to return plus the kefil, so now this item, it was again nignav. So now when we find out that I lied, so now again I have to return this item. I don't have to return the item twice. We're talking about that original item which you gave me, and I timed it was nignav, and then with the pale it was nizbar that it wasn't nignav. So now I still have that item which I have to return, and now it was nignav. So I became part of that item. I'm just saying that we're dealing with the same item. We're dealing with the same item. So Mela, that's why he pays 5 times the kefil and 1 time the item. Now halacha vav toan tainas ganav v'nishba. He tainas ganav, and now v'toan v'chazar v'toan tainas aveda v'nishba. And then he was a chazar v'toan tainas aveda v'nishba. Let's say in a different bezin. First he was a toan tainas ganav v'nishba in one bezin, and then he was a chazar v'toan tainas aveda v'nishba in another bezin. And vo Edom shalei nignav, and Edom came along and said it wasn't true, that he wasn't nignav. So Mela comes out that when he was a nishba about the Tontainas Ganef, he had a din of a Ganef. He had a din of a Ganef. And now, so that's there's Edom that it was late nignav. So Mela we established that he was a Ganef. And Mela for this Karen he owes a kefil. And now v'hoidahu shalei ovad. Now he's saying that when I tined that it was ovad, it's not true. It wasn't true. It wasn't true. What I said wasn't true. Memela, I swore falsely. Now, Lepel, I swore on what? On this Karen, the original Karen. We're talking about the same Karen. The same Karen, which there was a Toyentainas Ganef, and he swore about this Karen, and as a result of that, he has to pay kefil for trying to steal this Karen. So this same Karen, now he tried to get it through Tainus Aveda, and he went ahead and swore falsely. And for swearing falsely on an item, you have to pay Karen v'chemish. But we're talking about the same Karen. So maybe that same Karen, he's already paying a kefil for that Karen. And we learned before that when you pay a kefil for the Karen, you don't pay a chemish for the Karen. That's what we said. When you pay a Karen when you pay a kefil for the Karen, you don't pay a chemish for the Karen. But before we were talking about the same shvur. In other words, he was a toyin tainas ganav b'pikoden, and lepel he was nishba, and lepel we found that be'emes was in his rishus, so he's chayev kefil, and now he admits that he was a toyin that he swore falsely. Not only Adam came, but he also admitted. So we said that since he admitted, so the churi is chayev a chemish, and the answer is no, he's not chayev a chemish because you don't chayev a chemish on money that you're chayev a keren. But over there, the pshat is the same shvur, which was mechayev you the kefil, is now you want it to be mechayev a chemish, is not mechayev a chemish. But over here, there's two separate shvuas. It's the same money, but it's two separate shvuas. There was the original keren, which he gave it to him, and then he swore falsely, and he had a din of a ganef on that keren. And now on that same keren, now he swore again, and now he's tying it to Tainus Aveda v'nishba. He's tying Tainus Aveda v'nishba. And now he was made that this second Tainus Aveda is not true. So we say, since on this keren he's already paying a tashlumi kefil in a chinami for a different shvua because of this shvua that it was nignav, and now he's swearing another shvua that it was avad, but nevertheless he's not mishalem b'chemish. That's what he's saying. Heilu mishalem tashlumi kefil al pi edim is ein mishalem chemish al shvua achrein afal pi shahido shamomen hamachayv b'kefil petri min hashchemish. So in other words, since this moment is something which is being mechayev kefil through the shvua, that it was shvua that Gneivah, so b'meila he can't be chayev a chemish for the shvua of Avda. The truth is, you could have a tzir really where the Ram doesn't add that tzir. He was a toantain as ganav and nishba, and then he was takamoided that what he said was a lie, and then he was chazer v'toantain as aveda and nishba. So the same case like we had before. Before we had the chazer. He was toantain as ganav and nishba, and then he was again, and then he was moida, and then he was again toantain as ganav and nishba. So over there he's chayev twice kefil for the first shvur and for the second shvur, because he was trying to steal the same keren. The same keren he was trying to steal. He's only chayiv one keren because it's the same keren, but he's chayiv twice kefil. Over here, he swore, he did a ma'aseh Gneivah on this keren, and through that he's chayiv kefil for this keren. Now he's doing a shvur on this keren, so the chura let him be chayiv a choimish for this keren. So that we say no, that since lepel is chayiv kefil for this keren, so he can't be chayiv choimish for the keren, even though he wanted to be mechayiv in the choimish for this keren because of another shvur. Halacha zayin. Mosar sheirei l'shnayim. A person gives his share to two people. V'toan o tainas ganav, and they both tained that it was Gneivah. And v'nishbu, and then they both were nishba. They were both nishba. And then v'hoida echad mehan, and one of them comes after he was nishba. No Adam came yet. And he was moida that be'emes he was nishba b'sheker, and be'emes the share was by him. And v'hasheni, but the second one wasn't moida, and by him it was bo olav Adam. By him it was bo olav Adam. So the story again: two people were a shemer on a share. They both tainas ganav. They both swore that it was Gneivah. Now one of them, before any Adam come along, and he's moida that really he swore falsely. And the other one is not moida. The other one wasn't moida, and the other one Adam came and they paid swore falsely. So first of all, the shneim mishalem keren. They both pay keren. That's pashat. Now the shaila is over here. The first person that he was moida, since he was moida, so I made the beknas potter. Now even acharka bo Adam is potter because he was hoida bekeren. So memela, so therefore he's definitely potter from kefil. So the first person that swore falsely. And then he was Meida. And even though later on Bo Adam lepel, since he was Meida before the Adam came, so therefore he is not chayav kefil. But the second person, since he wasn't Meida, and the Adam came, so the chura the Adam came are being mechayev him kefil. You can't be mechayev him a full kefil because the other person was already Meida. So Memela, the question is to be mechayev and mehefer kefil. That's the issue over here. The person that wasn't moida, now Adam came along and said that he lied, and Memela comes out that he's a ganav, but Lepel, he stole it together with the other person. The other person was already a meida beknaz, and v'achar kach bo Adam, he's potter. So the question is, could this second person be nischayev through the Adam a hefer kefil? So the din is, Ishnei and Mishal Masakeren. The Keren, obviously they have to pay. Because one of them was Moida that he owes the Keren, and the other one there's Adam that he owes the Keren. Now the question is, does the person that wasn't Moida, is he Chayiv a Hefer Knas? He says, Tofas Bala Pikodin is a Kefil. If the Bala Pikodin, the owner of the Pikodin, grabs the Kefil, which part of the Kefil? The Kefil that the person that wasn't Moida, the half of the Kefil that the person that wasn't Moida owes, or could possibly owe, is Ein Mitzin Miyodeh. That's benegir the person that wasn't Meida. And the Shahoida, and the one that was Meida, is Mishalom Chemish. He definitely pays a Chemish. Kishar HaNishboin Shuas HaPikodin Sheidu Miatzman. And Memela, since he swore falsly, and he was really swearing falsly on half of the money, so the Chemish is going to be on half of the money. He owes half of the Karen. And he also is going to have to pay a Chemish for half of the Karen. That's Pashtus. Halacha Ches. Now the din is that when a person's Teveya, a ganef, and he's moida, so that's the din of moida b'knas potter. He's chayav the keren, and he's potter from the kefil. Now, when you have a case where there's someone gave something over to a shamer, and now the shamer is telling you that it was Gneivah, and later on they find the ganef. So really, there could be an issue: who is the baldover over here? Is the baldover the mafkid? Memela, the hidah is to the mafkid. Memela, when you're moida to the mafkid, so then you have a din of a moida b'knas. Or is the Baldova the Shemer? It could be different scenarios depending on what the matzav is. That's this halacha. Halacha ches. Bala pikodin shetoves hashemer v'nishba shenignav. Someone gives someone a pikodin, lepeil, when the Bala pikodin comes to the shemer, he tainas it was nignav, and he was nishba shenignav. He already swore that it was nignav. Now v'achar kach hukar aganav. Now we know who the ganav is. And now v'tova hashemer is haganav. The shemer went to the ganav, and v'hoidele haganav sheganav. And the ganav was made to the shemer that he was taka ganav. Now the shemer was already nishba to the bala pikod. So he was nishba to bala pikod. And the question is, does he still have a din of a shemer over here? Is he a baldover over here? L'chura, as far as the shemer is concerned, the shemer already became potter to the bala pikod. So Mela, the baldover of this ganav is not really the shemer, l'chura maybe, it could be only the bala pikod. So, as I say, v'tover ha-shemer is haganav, v'heidele haganav sheganav. And then, v'tover bala pikod is haganav, then the bala pikod went to the ganav, and v'kofer, and he was kofer. So to the shemer, he was meida, and to the bala pikod, he was kofer. Now, ubo Edom sheganav, and now Edom come along and say he was ganav. So the question is his heidah to the shemer going to pater him from knas? Whereas do we say that since he was meida sheganav, so if a person is meida sheganav, so meida b'knas is pater? Or do we say no, because since the shemer was already nishba, so memela he's no longer a shemer, he has no longer a din of shemer. So the din is azay. Im be'emes nishba ha-shemer, if the original shvua of the shemer was an emes shvua that it was nignav, ksheton shenignav, even though the chura were saying he tained as nignav, v'achar kachukar ganav, but it could be that he tained in a way that wasn't true. In other words, it was taka nignav, but he wasn't nignav exactly the way he said it. So memela, it's possible that he wasn't true. That's what the Mefarshim explained, because l'chura it's talking about he swore nignav and hukar ganav, so obviously we know it was nignav. So he's saying, Im be'emes nishba shemer, shetan shenignav, or you could also have a Metzias where he was Toan Shenignav before the Gneivah. You could have such a Metzias as well. He was Toan She was Nignav, and it was Taka before the Gneivah, and Lepel, later on there was a Gneivah, and it was Hukar Aganav. So the din is, so since the Shemer was Nishba be'emes, so therefore, Niftar Haganav me'akefel behida'asel Shemer. So therefore, since the Shemer really never lied to the Mafkid, so the Mafkid is interested in the Shemer still being the Shemer. In other words, Lepel, he never got his Bikotin back. Once the Bikotin is back, so obviously there's no longer a Shemer. Mashenkin, since the Bikotin is not there, so and there's hopefully a way of retrieving this Bikotin, so therefore, as far as the Mafkid is concerned, the Shemer is still the Shemer, because he never lied to him, I mean, if he's still the shamer, so now when the ganef actually was made to the shamer, it was a din of a made beknas, because he was being made to the baldover. So im be'emes nishba hashem ekshetoin shenigna niftak agana ben hakevel meidos l'shemer. However, v'im b'sheker nishba, if this taina of the ganef, even though lepel he tainas nignav and lepel it was hooker aganef, but somewhere or another it was b'sheker nigna. This taina was a sheker. Let's say either it wasn't yet nignav at that point in time, or not the way he said it. It was b'sheker nishba. So the din is ein mitzian akefel min aganef, because there's a svara to say that there's a svara to say that he's still a shamer. There's lepel, since lepel he was a shamer, and he's still a shamer, so to speak. So therefore you can't be meitzah the kefil min haganav, because there's a svara to say that it does have a din of a meida b'knas. However, v'im tafsu habaylim hakefil, but if the baylim v'tefes hakefil, ein mitziyim miyadim, because there's a svara to say that it doesn't have a din of meida b'knas. So nachamal. So again, you have the case where the shamer swore to the mafkid, and then the shamer mond by the ganav, the hooker aganav, and he mond by the ganav the Gneivah, and the ganav was made to the shamer, and then later on the mafkid mond from the shamer, and the shamer mond from the ganav, and he was koifer, and then lepel was boed. The question is, bekitzer, is the ganav potter with his eidah to the shamer? So if the shamer never lied, for sure the shamer is still a shamer, and therefore the ganav is potter with his eidah to the shamer. And if the shamer lied, so there's a suffix whether or not the shamer still has a din of a shamer, and if he has a din of a shamer, so then the ganav is potter. Then the ganav is potter because he was a meida b'knas. If he doesn't have a din of a shamer, he doesn't have a din of a ptur because he was a meida to someone that's not a baldover. So it's a suffix, so you can't mon by the ganav, but lepel, if the mafkid was teifes from the ganav, the kefil, so you could take it from him. Now, tavu habak, that's the din over here, that first the shamer was teveya, and he was made to the shamer. Now, what about fakert? Tavu habaylim is hashamer. Not fakert. Over here we have a different case completely. Tavu habaylim is hashamer v'shilim. The baylim mond from the shamer the money, the pikadon, and he paid. The emes is he could have tained Gneivah and been potter, but lepel he paid. Now the din is that shilim, we're going to learn b'hamsha that shilim v'leratzel l'shava. In other words, if he pays the money. The shamer pays the money. So later on, if the ganef is found, so the kefil goes to the shamer. If the ganef is found, so the kefil goes to the shamer because the shamer already paid for the spikod. So it's a special din that we learned at the beginning of Mafkid. Now tavu habaylim is hashamer v'shilim, and v'achar kach huker haganef. And now v'tavu habaylim, the baylim would teveya him, v'heidel lehem shegonav, and he was made it to the baylim that he was gonav. V'achar kach tavi hashemer v'kofar bei, and now we'll bo edim shegonav. So over here again is a suffix. Over here is a fakert suffix. Over there, in the first case, the suffix was whether the shamer has a din of a baldover. Why should the shamer not have a din of a baldover? Because he lied to the mafkid. The item belongs to the mafkid. The shaila is the shamer a baldover to mon from the ganef. So if he's still a shamer, so he's a baldover to mon from the ganef. And if he's no longer a shamer, so he's not a baldover. That's the question in the first case. Over here is a vakerta question. Over here, the shamer is definitely a baldover because the shamer paid for the item, and memela and lepel. If nimtza ganev and he pays kefil, the kefil goes to the shamer. So he's definitely a baldover. The shailas fakert is the bailam a baldover. Now, since the kefil is going to go to the shamer, but ultimately the bailam is the owner of the item. So over here the shaila is whether the bailam is the owner. So and that is the din. That so first it was hukar aganav tavua bail, and he was made shaganov. So he was made to the bail, and then he was kefer to the shamer. So the din is ein mitzian akefel min aganav, and when tafas hashemer is akefel. If the shamer grabs the kefel over here, the shamer is the one that's going to get the kefel. If he grabs the kefel, ein mitzian miyadi. B'chein adin b'tashlumi arba v'chamisha im tavach haganav imocher. So this din we have a suffix. Because you have a metzias with a shamer and a bailam, and we have a suffix whether the shamer has a din of a baldover, and that's the case when the shamer lied to the bailam, is he still have a din of a baldover, Or, and then there's another case whether the Bailam have a din of Abaldova, and that's the case when the Shemer paid for the item to the Bailam. Does the Bailam have a din of Abaldova? So therefore, does the Ganev's Heidah to the Bailam constitute a din of a Meida Beknas and Megel Pot? Halacha Tes Hatoyin Tainas Ganev B'Pikodin Shel Cotton. A cotton was mafked a Pikodin by someone, and then this person, the Nifkad, the Shemer was Toyin Tainas Ganev B'Pikodin Shel Cotton. Is aval pi shenoselik shul cotton v'tovik shul godel v'nishba v'charkach boedim. So l'chura, right now he's a godel. There's enochinami. This pikodin came to his hands when he was a cotton, but right now he's dealing with a godel. There's a godel money from the shemer the item, and the shemer is answering, is being tevei atainas Gneivah, and then the shemer went ahead and swears. So we know atay atainas Gneivah b'pikodin, and he swears he has a din of a ganav. So l'churi is dealing with a gadol. The answer is no, because since the bikadon was given to him while the mafkid was a cotton, so therefore this din doesn't apply. That this whole din that we learned b'negeh that atayin is ganef b'pikadon should have a din of a ganef, that's only by the parsha of kitin ish ve'ein nesinas cotton klum. And therefore v'tzorach shetia nesina u'tviyah shavim b'gadol. Side the nesina was while he was a gadol, inside the Tviyah was also while he was in a god. Halacha Yud. Shomer Shagonav Mershusei. So we have a Shomer that he did a Maisa Gneivah. So notice, till now there's a musig of a Ganav, Stam a Ganav, and then there's a musig of becoming a Ganav through being a Toy and Tainas Ganav. And now we have another case of a Shomer Shagonav Mershusei. He himself did the Maisa Gneivah. Again, Shagonav Tle Me'eda Shuvka Datzli. Whereas he has a flock of sheep that they gave it to him as a bikodin, and he went ahead and was gonav from that eder, or vesela mikis shehufkedetzli, or he took a sella from a kiss that was hufkedetzli. He has a pouch of money. Says as a im yeshel avedim, if there's adam that saw how he did the ma'aseh gneva, is chayiv bekefel. He's chayiv bekefel. Ba'aval pi shehivzer haselalim kemei b'hatlele edrei. Is areze chayev ba'achrayusan ad sheyedia bailam. So in other words, when a person steals this tle, he makes a ma'aseh gneva in the tle, and now, so the din is yeshel avedim is chayev bekefel. Now he went ahead and he took this tle and he returned it to the flock that he was watching. He has a whole flock that he's watching, and he was going from this flock. And now he went ahead and put it back into the flock. So the question is, by putting it back into the flock, was he mekayim the mitzvah of giving back? In other words, he returned the item to the original owner, and now again it's under his shmira. Or no, we say that since Lepel he stole this item, so therefore the Bailam are not interested in him being a shamer anymore. So by him returning it to the flock, he doesn't have back a din shamer like Kilu. He returned the Gneivah. Over here, the pshat is he has a dover hagonov by him, and he's chayiv b'achrayis. In other words, if he returned the item, has a din really of returning, so he only has achrayis as a shamer. Masha'enkin, if he doesn't have a din of returning, so he has achrayis like a ganef. A ganef is achroy even for einsim. A shamer could be potter, he could be a shamer chinam, a shamer socher. He's potter from einsim. So that's the chiddush over here. V'aval pi shehivzer asalulim kemi or vatla le'edrei. Is Areza Chai Bachrayusim, he's still Chai Bachrayus of this Tla, Achi Yediyah Bailam, until he tells the Bailam that he took it and returned it. Sharei Kol Shmirasi, because his Shmir, he's no longer a shamer, Ukilu Lehirza Klum, it's as if he never returned it, Achi Yediyah Ba'alav, until he returns to the Bailam. So there's a din that when a person, two dinim over here we're learning. One din we're learning is that when a person does a Maaseh Gneiva from a flock that he's a shamer on, so he's a chayiv kefil. That's din number one. Din number two, that when a person does a ma'aseh gneva on a tle that he's a shamer on, and now he returns that tle to the flock which he's the shamer on, so the din is he's still chayiv b'achrayis on that tle, unless he's mediyah the bailam that I stole it and I gave it back, and then the bailam could decide whether they want him to be a shamer on this tle, That's been a ger if he was a shamer. Now, Avala Goinev Ksela Mikis Chavere Ekeli Mibese, person does a Maaseh Gneva from someone's house or from someone's pocket, and then the Hirzer Dover Hagonev Mibese Limkeme, and he returns it. So he stole something. The person, the owner, the Maaseh Gneivah, normally the owner doesn't know about it, and now he returns it back. He returns it back to where he was gonna from. Says Azoy. Im yodu abaylim b'Gneivah say, if the Bailam at one point in time, in other words, before he returned it, knew that it was nignav, and v'liyodu b'chazirase, but they never knew that it was returned. So as far as he's concerned, there's something that was stolen from him, but he's not aware that it was returned. So the din is adayin aganav chay b'chriyusi, achiyim this moisef. The ganav is still chay b'chriyus of this item until he goes ahead and counts the money, and he's aware that he still has the money back. In other words, he had $100 in his pocket, and this person took from it $10, and now, and he became aware that someone took $10 from his pocket, and so if in the interim he counted his money and he realizes that now he has $100 in his pocket, which means obviously the ganav returned the item. So from here onwards, the ganav is not responsible for those $10. Masha'en kain, if Lepel, he never knows, he returned the item. He returned the item, but he didn't know that the item was returned. He knew that the $10 were taken, so he knows $10 were stolen from him, but he doesn't know that the $10 were returned to him. So Lepel, the ganav is still responsible for those $10. And Memela, if something will happen, and as a result of that he'll lose all his money, or lose that money, so Memela, so that ganav is still responsible to return those $10. That's again. Hagoynev kis, aval, hagoynev kis, hagoynev sela, mikis chavere, bekeli mi beisei, v'hir zer dover hagonav mi beiselim kemi. So as I say, im yodu abaylim b'Gneivah. If the Bailam knew about the Gneivah, v'le yodu b'chazirase, and they didn't know that he returned it, so then is adayin haganav chay b'chriyusei. The ganav is chay b'chriyusei ad shiyim nismeisim, unless he counts his money. Now mones kisei, if he did count his money, umatzah shalim aminyan, and he realizes that he got the money back, so from here onwards, potter. So the ganav already was mekayim chiyuv hashava of this Gneivah. That's talking about if the ganav, if the nignav knew about the Gneivah, so in order for the ganav to be mekayim the chiyuv hashava, is only if the nignav knows also of the hashava. However, he took $10 out of his pocket to steal, and then he did tshuva, and he put the $10 back into his pocket. He didn't know not about the taking out, he didn't know about the putting back in. So I feel a minyan in it, so then he doesn't have to be aware that he put it back in. Once he returns it back into the person's pocket, is nifta machriyose. The ganav becomes pat machriyose. Is nachmal. When a person steals something from someone, is that person was never aware that it was stolen, and lepel the ganav returned it. So from there onwards, the ganav is not achrayah. If the person was aware that it was stolen, he realized that something was stolen from him. So in order for the ganav to be mekayim chiyuv hashava, he has to be aware that it was returned. He doesn't have to tell him that he returned it, but if that person, if he turns it into his pocket, and that person counts his money and he realizes the money was returned, so from there onwards the ganav is no longer achrayah. But if lepel, he knew that it was stolen, and he wasn't aware that it was returned, so even though it was returned, so the ganav is still responsible until the nignav realizes that it was returned. Now all this is talking about items which aren't live items. We're talking about something that's inanimate objects. When are we talking about this? Something that's an inanimate object. It's not, doesn't walk off on its own. If a person goes ahead and steals a tle, a shepsel, from someone else's flock, and the Bailam realized that it was stolen. Now and that now he returned it back to the flock without the Bailam knowing that he returned it. And nignav, and this item died or got stolen. So the din is chay b'chriyusi. That's l'chure poshet. That's poshet. Again, if tles me'eder chaveda, and the Bailam knew about it, and he returned it to the Eder Shlei Midas HaBailam, is chay b'chriyusi. That's poshet. The v'monu esatzein v'hishlema potter, which is l'chure the same din, b'nigea inanimate object. The same din. In other words, if he didn't know about it, so then he's chayiv, and if he knew about it, then monu esatzein v'hishlema potter. However, that's din is taka the same, say a live item, say not a live item. However, v'im lo yodu abaylam le b'Gneivah le b'chazirasi, which over before we said that if it's an inanimate object, so then the Ganav is no longer responsible after he returned it, even though the Nignav didn't know about it because he never knew that it was stolen. Is Aval Pi, so over here is Punkt Fakert. Aval Pi Shemanu Satzein B'hi Shleima, even though he counted the tzayin after he returned it, and he realized it's Shleima, but he never knew it was Nignav, but he knows now it's Shleima, is Chayiv B'Achrayusi Achi Yediyas Abaylam. Over here is Chayiv B'Achrayus Achi Yediyas Abaylam. Why? Kedei Sheyishmru Zatla Agorav, in order for them to know, to watch the stolen item. Shari Limdei Derech Acheretz. Chutz Miderech Sha'ar Hatzayin Shebe'eder Zeh. So now this tzayin knows new ways. He knows to go out. So therefore, over here is fakert. Over here, there's a chumrah. In other words, when we're dealing with something that, let's say, he knew about, he knew that it was stolen, and then now he knows it was returned. So that was the same thing. If he knew it was stolen, now he knows it was returned. So then then the Ganav is potter. And if he knew it was stolen, but he didn't know it was returned, so then the Ganav is chayv. That's pasha. That's the same din like an inanimate object. But over here, the chiddush is that when you're dealing with a live shepsel, so over here there's a chumrah. Not only is he chayiv if he didn't know about it, fakert. If he didn't know that it was a Gneivah, and he also didn't know that it was returned, so by an inanimate object, it's considered beseder. Masha'in came when we're dealing with a shepsel, so fakert. If he knew it was stolen, and now he knew it was returned, so then he's takapotter. But if he never knew that it was stolen, and he never knew that it was returned, or certainly if he knew that it was stolen, but he didn't know that it was returned, in both ways, either he never knew it was stolen, never knew it was returned, or he knew it was stolen and he didn't know that it was returned. So in such cases, he is chayiv, and the reason for it is because lepel, since we're dealing with a live animal, that live animal could walk away. So once he realizes that you have a live animal which was stolen and returned, so you'd watch it better. And since lepel, he didn't give him that information to know to watch it better, so the Ganav is still responsible. He wasn't mechayiv, he wasn't mekayim the chiyuv hashav.